What Buddhism as a religion promises you that you will accomplish through meditation is that you will tear up desire by the roots, that you will overcome thirst. And no, it's not literal thirst. It's not thirst for water. It's not appetite for food. Buddhism, and specifically the marketing of Buddhist meditation, relies on holding your sexuality hostage against you. People get it into their heads that they would be something more than a man, not less, if only they weren't chained down by sexual desire.
If your meditation class or program like beats the control group, on a single variable, therefore Buddhism is true. You're like, no, that's not. I sort of stumbled into this topic. Really, I was also, like most meditation researchers, a meditation enthusiast and evangelist and promoter. I practiced in, the Western Insight tradition, which is loosely tied with Theravada Buddhism. Buddhists in particular are very kind of condescending or on their high horse about being more compassionate than everyone else too. And so I was like, well, some Buddhists have plenty of aggression. In the Varieties of Contemplative Experience study, we documented 59 categories of meditation-related challenges. It could be your thoughts speed up to an insane pace, or they disappear altogether. So there's no thoughts at all. We call that mind emptiness. Or you could have the ability, you lose the ability to form concepts. So it's concept loss. So for example, there was a woman in our study that was leaving retreat and driving, which is not a good idea, by the way, but, and got to a red stoplight and saw that it was the color red, but couldn't register, couldn't remember what red meant. That's concept loss. And then there's also delusions, which would be, having really, false ideas about things. So that's cognitive, and that can kind of bleed into psychosis. Perceptual changes, probably the most common, early thing that's not necessarily an adverse effect, but just is perceptual hypersensitivity. So you tend to see your colors get brighter, the sounds get more, suddenly you hear the clock ticking on the wall, you hear your own breathing, you hear your own blood in your ears. Eventually that same process, and we've written some papers about the neurobiology of this, but eventually that same perceptual hypersensitivity process can lead to, outright hallucinations. But when I did my dissertation study, which was looking at the effects of meditation on sleep as measured by brainwaves in a lab, thinking without any hesitation that meditation was going to improve sleep, when I got the data back, it basically caused cortical arousal, insomnia. So I'm guilty of this thing that you're talking about already. I didn't publish that data because I was like, okay, this is the wrong answer. It's not promoting meditation. So I won't publish it. And then, during that time that I wasn't publishing it, I went on a meditation retreat and I sort of was telling this teacher about these findings, and she kind of chastised me and said, I don't know why all you clinical psychologists are trying to make meditation into a relaxation technique. Everyone knows if you meditate enough, you stop sleeping. What are the assumptions that we're making as researchers and often clinically oriented healthcare providers when we use meditation as sort of a health promotion device? Are we missing something? Are we kind of making assumptions? Because it really wasn't designed for that initially, at least in Buddhist practices. It had a little bit of a different, or a lot of a different, origin story than for health benefits. And then the second question was, what else do meditation teachers know that they're not telling researchers? The most common emotion that we see is fear. So something in the fear spectrum, anxiety, fear, paranoia, that kind of thing. You can also see really any kind of emotion, just on steroids kind of thing. And then also, re-experiencing of past, traumas or stressful events. So flooding of kind of that. And then you can also see the opposite. So on one hand, too much emotion, and then also loss of all emotion altogether. So we call that affective blunting. So people have these sensations in their body that feels like electricity, energy, pressure, movement. So we wrote a whole paper about that, about the different metaphors people use for that. But that one tends to be really annoying and not more than annoying. It's like disabling. People are unable to work or do anything. It's so overwhelming. Insomnia is also super common. Some people get enlightenment or bust tattooed on their forehead. Not literally, but people leave their families, and then other people just lose all motivation altogether and literally sit and stare at a wall for 2 years. There's a lot of different changes in sense of self, often around loss of sense of self, because losing your sense of self, ego death or ego dissolution is a highly sought after effect of many different types of spiritual practices. So how do you know when is it not? What is an adverse effect? What makes it adverse, and who gets to decide? And so we found that question actually became really kind of pivotal, and that of the 59 categories, there weren't really any, except for maybe suicidality. There really weren't any that every single person who had the experience and every single teacher that we interviewed all said this was a bad thing.
So what's wrong with Christians offering a cure for homosexuality? What is wrong? What is so bad and evil and perverse with Christianity not promising you a miracle provided by their God, but a strange mixture of modern medical science, psychiatry, and spirituality, and promising that if you were born gay, if you've been homosexual for the last 10, 20 years, whatever your experience is, that now you can be cured by their religion or by the strange sort of scientific outhouse they've built just around the corner from their church. It's not easy to explain what's wrong with that, but it's easy to perceive. The vast majority of people despise this kind of Christian sexual realignment therapy. The vast majority of Christians perceive that there's something wrong with it, even if they can't quite analytically say what it is. But it seems to be very hard for people to perceive what's wrong with Buddhism as a religion when it promises you that if you are sexual, they can make you asexual. A miracle, no less pseudoscientific than promising to make a gay man straight. Buddhism, and specifically the marketing of Buddhist meditation, relies on holding your sexuality hostage against you just as much as Christianity, far more than Islam. Buddhism, Buddhist meditation specifically, is profoundly derivative of guilt about human sexuality. People who live with this notion that there's some kind of angel they ought to be, rather than admitting that we live our lives within certain biological limits, rather than admitting that we have desires that may be unattainable, but that we can't overcome, and that we certainly can't overcome through chanting, fasting, prayer, meditation, or any magical ritual whatsoever. People get it into their heads that they would be something more than a man, not less, if only they weren't chained down by sexual desire. What Buddhism as a religion promises you that you will accomplish through meditation is that you will tear up desire by the roots, that you will overcome thirst. And no, it's not literal thirst. It's not thirst for water. It's not appetite for food. That you'll cease to be constrained by this sex drive that you were born with and you've struggled with from the age of 13 maybe, maybe from the age of 11, this case may be, but that you have struggled with from puberty and you will continue to struggle with until the day you die. The idea that you could be something more, not less, if you could just cripple yourself, if you could just biologically cease to feel sexual desire. That is the marketing promise at the heart of Buddhist meditation. And of course, it's a promise they never can deliver on. But if it works for you, if you find that you have blunted yourself mentally, psychologically, or biologically, so that you no longer feel sexual desire, plot twist, there's nothing liberating about that. There's no enlightenment on the other side. Just as a homosexual man is not enlightened if he becomes heterosexual, a sexual man is not enlightened, not liberated, not empowered in any way by becoming asexual.
I mean, I think, meditation itself is positioned in this very interesting place where, on one hand, it's offered as secular, scientific, neuroscientific. It's often compared with, different kinds of drugs as having antidepressants or Ritalin. It can be compared to different kinds of drugs as, being a better treatment. So it's playing all the roles of a medical treatment. When it's convenient, and then when it's also convenient, it can also be by the same people presented as, a magical sacred practice that can't be captured by science.